Today, I have a story that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about boundaries and the choices we make. Picture this: you're staying at your friend's house minding your own business, when suddenly you find yourself in a situation you never expected. It's the kind of moment that could change everything in one sentence. And that's exactly what happened to me when my friend's mom caught me staring. Her response: well, let's just say it wasn't what I thought it would be. Ready for the wild ride? Let's dive in. Hey, I'm Ethan. I'm 26, single. I live just outside of Sacramento. I do freelance photography, portraits mostly, and some real estate gigs here and there to keep the bills paid. Life's been manageable, I guess. I broke up with my long-term girlfriend last year, and since then I've just been trying to figure things out. A few weeks ago, my apartment needed some serious repairs. Plumbing disaster. Long story. So my buddy Kyle offered to let me crash at his place for a bit. He's 21, goes to community college, and still lives with his mom. Her name is Melissa. I met her a couple of times before, but never really noticed her. Not like I did that day. It was the first morning after I moved in. Kyle had already left for class, and I was heading out to the backyard to get some air. That's when I saw her Melissa standing in the garden. She was wearing a loose t-shirt, denim shorts, barefoot on the grass, holding a hose watering her roses. Her hair was up messy like she didn't care, and somehow that made her look even better. I froze. Not because I meant to stare. I didn't. It just happened. The way the light hit her skin, the casual grace, and how she moved, it was like watching a scene from a movie you didn't expect to like but couldn't stop watching. And then she turned around. I thought I'd been subtle. I wasn't. She looked straight at me. I felt my face heat up like a kid caught doing something wrong. I opened my mouth to say something. An apology, maybe, but before I could get a word out, she tilted her head, gave me this amused little smile, and said, "Come in if you're brave enough." I blinked. She didn't say it sarcastically. It wasn't flirty in the obvious way either. It was teasing, but with weight behind it, like a dare wrapped in silk. Then she turned back around and kept watering the roses like nothing happened. I just stood there for a second, heart pounding. Was that just a joke? Did she really mean anything by it? I didn't know. But one thing was clear. Melissa had noticed me noticing her, and she didn't seem to mind. Later that day, when Kyle got back, everything felt normal again. We played video games, ate pizza, joked around like usual. Melissa stayed mostly in her room or the kitchen, polite, casual, not overly warm, but never cold either. But something had shifted. The next few days went by uneventfully. I did some editing work on my laptop from the guest room, helped out around the house to not feel like a freeloader. Melissa would occasionally pass by, exchange a few words, ask if I needed anything. It was always friendly, but I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the garden. The way she'd said it, the way she looked at me. One evening, Kyle went out to a movie with some friends and invited me along, but I said I was tired. Truth was, I wasn't in the mood to be around a crowd. I stayed in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat on the porch trying to clear my head. Melissa came out about 15 minutes later wearing a light sweater and yoga pants. She had a cup of tea in her hands. She didn't sit too close, but not far either. We talked just small stuff at first, whether my job, her garden. I was surprised how easy she was to talk to. She had this calm energy, but you could tell there was fire under the surface. At one point, she asked about my breakup. I gave a short version. She nodded like she understood. Then she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes we don't know what we really want until we're forced to start over. I looked at her. She looked back. And just like that, nothing happened. But everything changed. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how natural it felt to talk to her, about the fact that she was 45, and still no especially captivating. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was my friend's mom. This wasn't some college fling. It couldn't be. But deep down, I think I already knew that look in the garden wasn't the end of something inappropriate. It was the beginning of something I hadn't dared imagine. The next few days passed slowly, but not uneventfully, at least not for me. Outwardly, everything was normal. Kyle went to class, played games, scrolled through his phone like any 21-year-old, and Melissa kept up her routines, working from home, part-time, cooking, gardening, and staying polite but reserved. But under that surface there was a low hum of tension. Not dramatic, Not even spoken, but I could feel it every time I walked into a room she was in. One morning I came downstairs to make coffee. Melissa was already in the kitchen, dressed casually in a white button-down shirt and jeans, her hair still damp from shower. She greeted me with a quiet morning without turning. I mumbled one back and reached for a mug. As she moved past me to grab something from the cabinet, our arms brushed. Nothing more, just skin against skin, but it sent a jolt through me. She didn't flinch. Neither did I, but the air was different after that. Later that afternoon, Kyle asked me if I could pick up a package from the post office for him while he was in class. I said, sure. When I got back, Melissa was on the phone in the living room talking to a client about real estate listings. I try not to listen, but her voice carried calm, professional, yet commanding. She looked like she belonged in some home design magazine, sharp but effortlessly feminine. When she hung up, I dropped the package on the table and said, "Delivery complete." She smiled. "Thanks, Ethan." Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. I turned to leave, and then she said, "Do you have a minute?" I stopped, heart immediately picking up pace. "Sure." She motioned for me to sit at the dining table. I did. She sat across from me. I wanted to ask something. She said, "Do you feel uncomfortable here with me?" The question hit hard. She wasn't smiling. She looked serious but not cold. I hesitated. No, not at all. Why? Her fingers played with a silver ring on her hand. "You've been a little quiet lately." I smiled awkwardly, trying to be respectful. Melissa tilted her head slightly like she was studying me. "Respect is good, but don't act like you can't be yourself. I'm not gonna bite." I let out a breath. "It's not that. I don't want to overstep." Another pause. "Overstep what?" she asked. I looked at her. Really looked. The line between casual and personal was already gone. It was just a matter of who would acknowledge it first. "I don't know," I said. "I guess I'm trying to keep things simple." Melissa leaned back in her chair. "Simple is overrated." That night, I barely slept. The next day, Kyle invited me out for drinks with some friends. I said I had editing to finish. He shrugged and went without question. Once he left, I found myself sitting in the guest room, laptop open, doing absolutely nothing. My head was spinning. Was I imagining all of this? Was she just being nice? And I was reading into it like some teenager with a crush. I walked out into the hallway, needing water. As I passed the living room, I saw Melissa on the couch with a book in her hands, glasses on a blanket over her lap. She looked up. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just grabbing water." She nodded. I stood there for a second too long. Then I said, "You're really easy to talk to. You know that." She blinked slowly. "Not everyone thinks so." "I do." She set the book down. "Do you always speak your mind like this?" "No," I said, "only when I can't stop thinking about something." Another long pause. Her eyes locked onto mine, and then she smiled barely. "You're brave," she said. "I like that." It felt like something inside me clicked. No lightning bolt, no soundtrack, just two people sitting in a quiet room, neither of them pretending anymore. I went back to my room, but not to sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall, knowing that this was no longer about imagination. The tension wasn't one-sided. It wasn't fiction. It was real, and it was growing. Over the next couple of days, Kyle was barely home. Group projects, overnight study sessions, plans with his girlfriend, all reasons that left me and Melissa alone in the house more and more. We didn't spend time together per se, but we were in each other's orbit, and every little exchange felt charged. One night I came home late after a photo shoot and found Melissa still awake in the kitchen, sipping wine and reading on her phone. She offered me a glass. I said yes. We sat at the table in near silence. At one point, I glanced over and she met my eyes. "I'm not reckless, Ethan," she said out of nowhere. "I didn't think you were." "I don't do things without thinking them through." I nodded, not fully understanding where she was going, but I'm also not one to run away from what's real. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was loaded. I knew then this wasn't a phase. It wasn't a silly fantasy. It was a slow, deliberate slide towards something neither of us planned, but both of us wanted it. Happened on a Friday night. Kyle was out of town for the weekend, some 2-day leadership camp his college required for scholarship students. He asked me to keep an eye on the house and water the plants while he was gone. I agreed without hesitation. That afternoon, I spent a few hours out taking headshots for a real estate team downtown. I didn't get home until after 8. When I walked through the front door, the house was dim and quiet. I called out a quick, "Hey, I'm back," but didn't hear a reply. I figured Melissa was in her room or out somewhere. I dropped my bag near the stairs and headed to the kitchen to grab something to eat. The fridge was full, clearly stocked for Kyle's absence, but I wasn't in the mood to cook. Then I heard her voice. "Thought you might be hungry." I turned. She stood at the edge of the kitchen barefoot, wearing black leggings and an oversized gray sweater that hung off one shoulder. Her hair was tied up casually, face relaxed, no makeup, and somehow she looked even more stunning like that. "I am," I said. Melissa opened the oven and pulled out a tray of roasted vegetables and salmon. "I figured you'd be too tired to bother with takeout." I smiled. "You figured right." We sat at the table. No background music, just the sound of silverware and a soft conversation. She asked about my shoot. I asked how her day went. It all felt natural. Too natural. When we finished eating, she poured 2 glasses of wine. It wasn't even framed as a gesture. She just did it like this was normal. We moved to the living room. The lighting was low. She sat on the couch, curled up with her legs under her. I took the chair across from her. We talked. Nothing deep at first. Some story about Kyle as a kid that made her laugh. A memory of her late husband's terrible taste in furniture. Then it shifted. "I wasn't always this reserved," she said, twirling the stem of her glass. "I don't think you're reserved," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "No, I think you're careful. There's a difference." She studied me for a second. "You're very good at reading people." "I try." Another pause. She leaned forward slightly, eyes focused. "Tell me something honest." I hesitated, then said it. "I think about you more than I should." She didn't flinch. "How often is that?" "Every day since I moved in." A soft, measured breath escaped her lips. She put her glass down and stood up. Then, to my complete surprise, she walked over slowly and sat next to me on the armrest of the chair. She didn't touch me, didn't lean in, just sat there close enough to feel the heat between us. "You're not a kid, Ethan," she said quietly. "I know this could be a mistake. Then let me make it with you." She looked at me for a long moment. Her fingers touched mine lightly, like testing a current. Then she leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild or cinematic. It was slow, deliberate, real. Her lips were soft and her breath tasted like wine and something warmer. When she pulled back, her eyes stayed closed for a second longer than normal. "I told myself this couldn't happen," she whispered. "But it is," I said. She didn't argue. We moved to the couch without a word. No performance, no seduction, just 2 people who'd circled each other for days, finally letting it happen. That night wasn't about lust. It was connection, emotional, not just physical. She was careful. I was gentle. We didn't rush anything. We just let go. Afterward, we lay there side by side, fully clothed again, just staring at the ceiling in silence. Melissa turned her head to me. "This doesn't mean I know what comes next. I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I just didn't want to keep pretending." She nodded. Neither did I. We slept in separate rooms. In the morning, we didn't speak about it, but nothing felt awkward. In fact, it felt the opposite, calm. The next day, she made breakfast. We didn't talk about the night before, but she smiled more, stood a little closer, and her hand lingered on my shoulder when she walked past. Over the weekend, we didn't repeat it, but we didn't avoid each other either. We shared quiet moments, brushed hands when passing dishes, and sat closer than necessary on the couch. It wasn't constant affection, it was restraint. It was the knowledge that something had shifted and neither of us was rushing to define it. By Monday morning, Kyle was back. Everything returned to normal, except it wasn't. Not for me. And judging by the way Melissa looked at me when no one was watching, not for her either. We had crossed the line and neither of us regretted it. The following week was a strange balancing act. Kyle was back home, bouncing between classes, gym sessions, and late-night Discord calls with his friends. To him, life was running as usual. To me and Melissa, every hour in the house was a quiet, carefully choreographed routine of not getting caught. But it wasn't sleazy. That's the thing. It wasn't some cliché fantasy about sneaking around. What we had wasn't dirty or careless. It was honest quiet, and in a way I didn't expect meaningful. I kept doing my freelance work. Melissa went on with hers. But almost every day at some point we found moments to share. A look across the hallway, a brief touch when handing off a cup of coffee, a late-night chat in the backyard under the porch light after Kyle went to bed. One night, about a week after we crossed the line, she and I were alone again. Kyle had gone out with his girlfriend, probably wouldn't be back until late. I was in the kitchen heating up leftovers. Melissa walked in, hair up, wearing an oversized flannel shirt and leggings. She didn't say anything, just walked up beside me and helped with the plates. As we stood next to each other, she reached for the silverware drawer. Her hand brushed mine. Neither of us pulled away. She looked up at me. "I've been thinking about this more than I should," she said. "I didn't play dumb." "Me too. I keep asking myself what the end of this looks like." I paused. "Why does it have to end?" Melissa leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Because it always does. Feelings fade, real life comes back in, and Kyle, he still has no idea." "He doesn't," I admitted, "but we haven't done anything wrong to him." She looked at me serious. "I know, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't feel like a betrayal to him." I didn't argue. I couldn't. She was right. We moved to the living room, sat on opposite sides of the couch. I told her the truth, that I didn't know where it was going either, but I hadn't felt this way about someone in years, that she wasn't just some older woman I was attracted to, that it wasn't just physical. Melissa listened, eyes focused, unmoving. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "You make me feel seen, Nate, not just looked at seen." That hit me. She told me about her past, not just the facts I already knew, but the feelings she had never shared. About being widowed at 35, about trying to date again in her 40s, and how it felt like being invisible to everyone except men looking for a thrill. About feeling like a background character in her own life. "You're not a background character," I told her. "You're the main plot." She laughed. Not a big laugh, just a real one. That night we didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. We just talked. Sat there with our legs half curled on the couch, sipping tea, eyes flickering between each other and the window where rain tapped against the glass. It was probably the most intimate night we'd shared. By the third week, it was clear that what we had was more than just a phase. We started texting cautiously, briefly, nothing risky but enough to feel connected during the day. One afternoon while Kyle was out at the gym, Melissa knocked on my door. She had tears in her eyes, not crying, but on the edge. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I got a call from my sister," she said. "She's sick. I need to fly out to Arizona for a few days." I told her to go. I offered to drive her to the airport. She nodded but didn't move. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Promise me you won't disappear while I'm gone." That's when I knew. She had let her guard down. She was scared I'd treat this like a fling and walk away. I stepped closer and took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. She looked up at me, and for a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she kissed me, not like the first time, not with hesitation or heat, but with real affection. I drove her to the airport the next morning. The house felt empty without her. Kyle, oblivious, spent most of the weekend gaming and microwaving frozen meals. I kept to myself, counting the days until she'd be back. We texted each evening. Short, careful exchanges, but one night she sent something different. "I've been trying not to miss you too much, it's not working." I stared at that message longer than I should have, then typed back, "Good. I miss you too." She came back 3 days later. I picked her up at the airport again. In the car we didn't talk much, but in the silence there was comfort. When we got back to the house, Kyle was already asleep. I brought in her suitcase. As I turned to leave her room, she reached for my hand and stopped me. "I don't know how this ends," she whispered. "Neither do I," I said. "But I know how it feels right now." She smiled faintly. "And how does it feel right I said right. That night, we didn't need words. We lay next to each other in her bed, fully dressed, quiet, her head on my chest. We fell asleep like that. I don't know if it was love, but it was real. And for now, that was enough. A few more weeks passed. Everything between me and Melissa had become routine, but not in a bad way. In a quiet, steady, grounded way. When Kyle was out or asleep, we spent time together. Sometimes talking, sometimes cooking, sometimes just sitting on the porch in silence. Legs touching hands hidden between coffee mugs and folded knees. It wasn't fireworks anymore. It was comfort connection, a shared calm in a house where everything had to remain unspoken, but we both knew it couldn't last. I think we were just waiting for one of us to say it. That moment came one Saturday morning. I was in the backyard cleaning the grill while Kyle was inside watching TV. Melissa stepped outside barefoot again, arms crossed. She stood quietly for a moment, looking at me like she was memorizing the shape of my face. Then she said it. "We need to talk." My heart dropped. I put the grill brush down. "Okay." She motioned to the patio chairs. We sat. Melissa didn't dance around it. That wasn't her style. "I've been thinking about this a lot," she said. "About us?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too. I care about you, Nate. I need you to know that. I care about you too." She looked down, fingers tapping her knee. "But this can't keep going." Silence. "It's not just about Kyle," she continued, "though that's a big part of it. It's about me, about what kind of life I want to live and how much I'm willing to hide to have it." I didn't argue. I couldn't. I thought the same things at night, lying awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering what we were building, and whether it had any kind of foundation beyond the now. "I'm not ashamed of what we had," she said. "Not 1 second of it. But I know myself. I'm not the kind of woman who wants to live a secret life." I looked at her. She wasn't cold. She wasn't pushing me away. She was being honest the same way she always had. "And you deserve more than pieces of me," she added. "You deserve someone who can be with you in the open, someone who doesn't have to pretend every day like nothing's happening." I swallowed hard. It didn't feel like a breakup because we never called it a relationship, but the pain in my chest felt the same. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. She exhaled. "You finish fixing your apartment. You move back in. We go back to being friends, or at least people who once shared something beautiful." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I nodded slowly, willingly. "I just want to say thank you," I told her, "for not treating this like a mistake." She smiled, small, sad, and real. "It wasn't. You reminded me what it's like to feel seen, to be touched with care." I'll never forget that. Neither would I. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It wasn't a movie scene. It was two adults facing reality and doing the only responsible thing left, letting go before it turned into something that would ruin the good we had. I moved out a few days later, told Kyle my apartment was finally ready and I wanted my space again. He dapped me up, wished me luck, and said his mom would probably miss having someone else do the dishes for once. She did. The last time I saw her was the day I came back to pick up a box I'd left in the closet. Melissa met me at the door. She was wearing a simple blue blouse and jeans, barefoot as usual. She handed me the box without small talk. We stood there for a moment, neither of us saying anything. Then she said, "Take care of yourself, Nate." "You too." And that was it. I walked away, not angry, not broken, just grateful. What we had wasn't forever. It was a chapter, a quiet, meaningful one. And sometimes that's enough. So here's the question. Was it all just a mistake? A random moment of weakness or something more? Could I have made a different choice? Some of you might think I crossed a line, while others might see it as just part of life's messy, unpredictable nature. One thing's for sure, though, moments like these leave you questioning your own boundaries. So, what do you think? Was it all just a weird, harmless interaction, or was there something deeper at play? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you all think. Don't forget to hit that follow button. It keeps me motivated to share more stories that push the envelope and leave you thinking. Or if you're into it, hit the #1 key and show your support.